All right. Well, welcome everybody. Um, as Don introduced, my name is Ben Grimes. I am a livestock farmer in central North Carolina. Before we get started, I'd really love to know where people are coming from. So I get a sense of who I'm talking to and uh, what your guys' familiarity with farming is. If you want to shout it out or put it in a chat, I'd just love to take 30 seconds and do that. I'm assuming people are putting in the chat. Um,
Oh, we have Geneva, Switzerland.
Switzerland.
Yep.
Very good. Cool.
And you can also put it in your change your name. So you can rename yourself and add your
Oh, Zimbabwe. Very cool. Everly, I think we were in a book club together. Florida, Germany, Molokai, but previously from Saskatchewan, Alberta, Canada. I eat Ben's food. Hi, Simona. Hi, Lee. These are local people here. Well, very cool. Keep putting stuff in the chat. I'll try to monitor it, or Don, you can interrupt me. One of these things that's kind of awkward for me about webinars is it kind of feels sometimes like I'm a talking head, just talking into space. So feel free to chime in if you have a question or a comment or put something in the chat and just let me know. Because I'm more used to doing presentations in groups of people where I can get facial feedback and I can get real-time questions. And I think that kind of feedback helps me know how I'm doing and what you guys are interested. So feel free, really, absolutely feel free to interrupt me and ask questions along the way. Um, but in short, my talk today is called From Soil to Soul, which another Baha'i actually reached out to me and said that she had made a t-shirt with the same name a couple years ago, which I think is quite funny. Subtitle is, agriculture, regeneration, and spiritual maturity. So we're going to look at this conversation, and the general sense of it is looking at agriculture as ecological, economic, and a spiritual practice. So this is a framework that we're looking at it as. And we're going to examine the question of how food systems reflect humanity's moral humanity. And it's going to be grounded I'm sorry, in my own narrative and my own experience with the Baha'i faith. Before we get started on that, you know, I believe that, and the Baha'i writings teach us that nature is an expression of these divine attributes, that in nature we can find God, and that in all forms of nature, from the smallest atom to the largest tree and animals, in those systems, we can all find how God works. And getting close to those systems and understanding those systems allows us to better know God. And I believe that our interaction and how we interact with nature has a moral meaning. And it demonstrates who we are as a society and how we carry ourselves and how we interact in God's creation. And of all of these interactions that we have in the world with nature, agriculture is the most intimate relationship with the earth. And I believe that's because we in our farming world, we take nature and we shift it and change it and form it into a vision that we want to see of the world. And that is a reflection of our divine attributes, of our capacity that no other creature has to our extent. And it is something that God has bestowed on us and something that allows us to reflect his characters and his qualities. And how we do so is an example, is a demonstration of our spiritual maturity. So a little bit about me. As Don said, I don't have any formal background in farming, meaning I did not grow up in a farming family. I did not go to college for farming. I grew up in Seattle, Washington. My background is actually my parents had a Birkenstock store and we sold Birkenstocks. We had three stores in the Seattle area. And for those who don't know, we all know what, Birkenstocks as a fashion symbol or whatever they stand for. But one thing about Birkenstocks that is important is that they're also incredibly sustainable. And that's a core part, or at least they were growing up. I'm not sure how they do anything anymore, but growing up, sustainability was actually a really key part of their business model. And so growing up in this family, small business was a really important part of my upbringing, as well as this link to sustainability, this link to environmental well-being. So this is the mold from which I grew up, and I was really interested in environment, and I really believed in doing what society told me to do to be a good environmentalist, which in the 90s and still today is reduce, recycle, reuse. And I got into college and I was in an anthropology class at Oregon State University, and I started learning about the food system. And I learned about how the food system is so environmentally degrading. And it hit me with this juxtaposition, this hypocrisy that here I was believing that I was being a good environmental steward, but that by the very act of eating, I was contributing to the degradation of the environment. And so there was this realization that my lifestyle choices felt insufficient and that I had to do something else, and that there had to be a better way to exist in the world and not be inherently degrading. And this is also about the same time that I started becoming interested in the Baha'i faith. I should say that I was raised in the Baha'i family, but I really didn't know much or anything at all about the Baha'i faith until I was about 20. There's some quotes that I put in here. I'll read some of them. We can take a minute and look at them and reflect on them. I wasn't going to read them all, but I think that they do frame the spiritual elements along with the rest of the talk that I'm doing. And so I got interested in farming and about the theory of farming and different ways that I could interact in this world and that we as a species could interact in this world in a way that was not environmentally degrading. And right out of college, I got my hands in the dirt and I worked on a vegetable farm for one season. And that was really an incredible awakening experience for me. And as a city kid, I never lived in a rural area and I never had a lot of experience working the land. And I loved farming and I loved living in a rural area. I loved being able to grow food and I loved seeing the interaction between what I was doing with my hands and with my body and its physical manifestation in the earth. And I thought that was just the most beautiful experience that I'd ever had in life. And it's still the magic today that gets me excited about farming. And in this journey of a couple of years before I started this farm in 2013, I also got exposed to the world of regenerative and restoration agriculture and restoration ecosystems. Um, and I'm going to talk more about this in just a second, about what these terms mean and what they mean to me and how they relate to a spiritual maturity. So, in when we're thinking about regeneration and restoration agriculture, it's in the framework that our planet used to have a very interconnected and abundant functioning ecosystems. And for over the last several thousand years, humans have done a really good job of wiping out or really harshly limiting those ecosystems. And what we have today is just a fragment of the abundance that used to exist on the planet. I'm most familiar with North America, but everywhere that humans have gone, we have severely limited the capacity of our ecosystems. And I believe that through the tool of farming, we can't bring back the interconnected web of species that existed just because of extinction, but we can bring back function. And so I look at animals in agriculture as a way to bring back this ecosystem function. We're not going to bring back vast herds of bison on the plains. but we can bring back that function of how they existed. And in North America and much of the world, we had these grazing animals, these herbivores that were in vast numbers, and they were always on the move. And this is our keystone species, is they were always on the move. And in their movement, they were moving because of two things. One, because they needed food and they were tightly bunched up. And so they'd eat everything, poop heavily, and then move on and let that land rest and regenerate. And the reason that they moved is because there was predator pressure on them and also because they ate everything. And now when you look at cattle farms, they're going to be closed up. It's a tight fence and there's no management. They're loose on, 20, 10, 50, 100 acres, whatever that farm might be. And in that kind of system, when it's an open system, the cattle can graze and pick and choose, and they're not being bunched up and forced to eat everything. And what happens, you end up getting degradation. But by constantly moving and the animals, they manure heavily on the land, it rests, regenerates, and then it can come back. And then by the time that it comes back, it's absorbed all that manure and all that impact, and it comes back stronger and healthier. And this is the system, the dance, ecosystem dance that has built the best soils on the planet in the American Midwest, Eurasian steppe. These are the soils that are now the breadbaskets of the world. And they're built on this system of movement of animals. And I'm not naive enough to think that we can bring back vast herds of migratory animals, although I would personally love to see it. But I think that we can use livestock today as a tool to get us to a place where we have some of that function back so that we can have a functioning ecosystem and a healthy planet. And I think in the world of agriculture, in the world of sustainability, we often look at animals and say, oh, the animals are the problem. The animals, we cite the carbon emissions, the methane emissions from cattle, and the river runoff and pollution from different CAFO farms. And that's all true, but it's not the animal's fault. That's our fault as a human species and how we treat those animals. There's one person in the agricultural world who says it's not the cow, it's the how. In my experience, the cow is the best tool that we have for ecological restoration, at least in this part of North America. I can't speak for the whole world, but it is how we manage that cow and what we do with it that is going to depend on if it's a positive or negative impact on the world. So my farm today, jumping a little bit more about my story, then get back to the narrative. As Don said, I'm in North Carolina. I'm in the central part of the state in what's called the Triangle, which is going to be the region around Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill. I mostly am a poultry farm. I do a lot of chickens, ducks, and turkeys, but I also do some hogs and cattle. So we're a direct consumer farm. So we sell a lot direct to consumer at a farmer's market and home delivery systems. We also sell to a lot of mid-tier aggregators who are often other local farmers who might grow beef or might grow pork, and then they'll buy in our poultry and they'll sell it to their customers. And we raise, and in the case of poultry, we process it on the farm. Pork and beef, we have a third-party processor, and then we bring everything back to the farm and we distribute it out to the world from the farm. And one of the things that I really love about the farm is just it brings me so much wonder and so much awe, and it really helps me connect with God. And I believe this because it is a layered ecosystem. And I'm contrasting and comparing a lot between industrial agriculture and what I'm doing. And I think that's an important distinction because it does link to the spiritual maturity of our species at the moment. And in industrial agriculture, well, in on my farm, there's this incredible biodiversity, and there's an incredible layering and complex systems between soil, plants, animals, and microbes. And the more the more life there is on my farm, the more abundant the land is for my livestock. And so there's a direct feedback. If I have plentiful grasses and there's trees that are producing fruit and nuts, and it brings in an abundance of birds and deer and possums and microbes, then all of that is going to contribute back to the soil health, which then allows my animals to be healthier. And I've been practicing this now for about 13 years, and I've been able to witness this firsthand. And it is the most beautiful, incredible thing to take a piece of land and visibly see how your actions make it healthier, more biodiverse. And so I believe that this mutual benefit really increases resilience. And what I mean by resilience is that there's a system in place that I don't control that can weather different weather elements, that can weather a drought, for example, or weather increased rainfall or extreme heat or extreme cold. And in this system of biodiversity, there are some plants that are going to do better if it's dry, some plants that are going to do better if it's wet or cold or hot. And the same goes for different bugs. And this whole system, it can shift and change based on how the seasons go. So it's a very different than, say, a cornfield, which is you're just focusing on one monocrop and you're really paying attention to the health of that corn. I need to think about the life of the entire system and how it's flowing and working together. And that allows me to really build this ecosystem and build this ecosystem function. And I think this is an important quote here because this reflects the joy and the wonder and complexity that I get with my farm. In the smallest atom, there are signs of the greatest worlds. Every day I get to go out and play and watch how the ecosystem functions and churns and changes. And that is just such a beautiful, joyful thing for me. And I get to feel closer to God by examining just the smallest little spider crawling on a blade of grass. It's really just a beautiful thing. I'm going to take a second here. There were some comments in the chat. Just want to look to see if there were any questions. Angela Fakembe, how are you? It's good to see you. A friend from Cameroon. I lived in Cameroon for 4 years. That's fun. Oh, you're in Germany now. Very cool.
Thank you.
Um, good to hear your voice. Okay, so there's comments here. There's no questions. So I'll get back to the presentation if I can find it.
One quick question.
Yeah,
Where are you at in the triangle?
I'm in rural Orange County in Hurdle Mills. So I'm the northeast part of Orange County.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, it's a quite a large region and it can encompass different towns and many different counties. So I'm about 40 minutes north of Durham, north of Chapel Hill, about an hour from Raleigh.
Got it. A lot of good Carolina clay there still. Yeah.
Yep, we got a lot of good Carolina clay here. And it's one of the fun things is when I started, like so much of the farm had this red clay soil, and it still does if you dig down, but on top there's actually a good layer of black soil. And that's just, again, building that organic matter in the soil is so important to me. And the movement of my animals, it actually does work. Any other questions before I continue on?
Yeah, what is your acreage?
I have 20 acres here. I lease another 5, and then I contract farm with some local farmers, another probably 5. So all in all, it's about 30 acres.
Do you have a
Yeah,
website?
yeah, the website is carolinapastures.com. That's the best website. There's also dawnbreakerfarms.com, but I couldn't figure out, I'm not a tech guy. And so that website kind of disintegrated, unfortunately. Carolina Pastures is the best place to find me. Yeah, no, I have a small base. I've only got 20 acres here, and that's why I'm not doing a lot of beef. If I would, why I focus on a poultry farm is because I'm on a small land base, and I can put a lot of birds on the ground and manage them in a way that I want to and I believe in. But if I had more land than I'd be doing beef. Right now, I'm only finishing between all the land that I manage and graze and contract. I finish about 8 beef a year, which is a small portion of the overall business.
Right. Do you have eggs?
I don't do eggs.
And what kind of beef, what strains of beef, breeds of beef do you use?
We have one herd, which is a red Devon herd, and then my other herd is a red and black Angus.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Ben,
come from Aberdeen.
hmm. Ben, Winnie has her hand up.
Yeah,
Right.
Winnie.
Yes, you may get to this. I wondered about how your family and also do you make enough income from the work that you're doing? Is it all your own labor too? Thank
Yeah.
you.
I'm gonna get to those first two questions. The labor one, I'm not, so I'll just answer it now, is it used to be until about 3, 4 years ago, and I started hiring people. So now I have on the farm, it's one full-time person, and then me, and then I have a couple part-time people doing things like a delivery driver. And when we're processing poultry, I bring in a lot of people. Like we'll have 8 people on the farm for processing poultry. Um, but day-to-day stuff, it's just me and one other guy. And I had a baby. If you saw on that first slide, I had a baby last year. So this year I have mostly been letting the full-time guy do most of the animal management just because I've been with the baby more.
Ben, I was just wondering.
Anything else?
Ben,
Yeah.
I was just wondering. Maybe you're going to get to this. Um, just how the farm has grown. How is it? From where you started. Are you going to talk about that? How you first started with your farm, and then how it's progressed at all?
I wasn't. Let's see. Maybe maybe that's a longer question that can go into the questions and answers at the end.
Okay, great.
It's certainly adapted and changed a lot
Right.
over the years, and that is a really good question, but I think it's a longer one. I don't want to make sure we have time to get through the presentation.
Okay, well, let's do that then.
But that can be, I can store that one in my head. It can be the first question
All right.
that we bring up when it gets to questions and answers.
Okay, great. So, want to go back
All
to
right. Well, so looking at civilization and maturity, I think that the way that we currently have our farming systems and the way that we're interacting with the world is it's generally extractive, and I think it reflects our immature experiences as a human. And
And
I
are you
think
going
that
to
the
go
way
back?
that,
Are you going to be sharing screen again, or
oh, sorry, is it not shared
no?
anymore?
It's not shared. Yeah,
I'm sorry. Let
it's good.
me figure out how to do that. I didn't realize I
It's
stopped.
yeah, the green box at the bottom.
Yep.
There, there we go.
Okay. So I believe that the way that we go about our food system is inherently degrading. And I believe that this is a spiritual issue, and that the way that we are interacting with God's creation is a demonstration of our spiritual immaturity. And I think that we need to bring more complexity and awareness of the interactive web that supports life into our farming systems. And I don't believe that I'm the perfect model, but I believe that I'm trying to make a step in the right direction so that the next generation can carry it on. And I believe that agriculture, in the Bahá'í writings, we're told that agriculture is such a vital industry of society as a whole. So Abdul Baha says special regard must be paid to agriculture. Development of this one vital industry is the first step toward the establishment of a sound economic basis. And this is a really, I think, important quote in the Bahá'í writings, and we're all here because we believe in this exact same idea that agriculture is at the core of who we are as a society. And it really is central to economic and social stability. And even though in a lot of the world we moved away from agriculture as a main source of labor, historically and still much of the world today, agriculture is such a key part of our employment, of how people get money, of how we spend our time, and around how our communities develop and how our communities function. And on my farm, I was in Iowa 2 weeks ago, and a lot of the people there, I was at a farming conference, and people were talking about how in Iowa, which is such an incredibly rich and abundant agricultural space, that because of the way that it's farmed, that it's mostly monocrops and they're finishing hogs and finishing cattle, that they've taken the life out of the community, and that rural Iowa is empty. And that rural Iowa, this richest farmland in the world, is just it's just inert. And I think that stands in sharp contrast to what I'm doing, where I'm working and building this ecosystem function. And as I've said, I've been doing this now for 13 years, and I get to see and witness it firsthand how the land responds positively to intensive mob grazing, to the kind of grazing that I'm doing with regenerative agricultural models. And things that I'm seeing visually improve soil health, things like I see a lot more organic matter in the soil. There's more life in the soil between the bugs that I can see, the worms, the hard shell guys. And there's more biodiversity, both in the number of birds, the species of birds, and I can see visually that the grass is greener where I graze my animals from one season to the next. And one of the economic benefits of this is that I have an extended grazing season. So my grass greens up right now, it's late January. My grass greens up about 2, 3 weeks earlier than any of my neighbors. So I can start grazing fresh grass usually late February, early March, and that's weeks ahead of my neighbors. And likewise in the fall, I can go further into the winter grazing. So my season for hay is cut in about a third. And I think that over time, I can cut that down even more. And there's a direct economic impact on that. So by taking care of the soil and managing the animals in a healthy, dynamic way, then there's a direct economic return in the health of the soil and thus what I can produce as a farmer. And to answer your question, Winnie, I'm also so blessed because I actually get to be a full-time farmer and I get to have an economically viable way of life. And in the US, we have 1% of farmers. 1% of our population are farmers. And I don't know what the statistic is, but I know just living in a rural area that of that 1%, there's a even smaller percent of that 1% that can be full-time farmers. And I think that to me is really a lack or a loss in our communities that farmers have to go off farm to be able to get income. And so I am blessed and lucky enough to be able to rely on the farm full time for my economic viability, and I have so since 2017. And I believe that ecological and economic sustainability are aligned. This goes back to the extended grazing season, that by having extended grazing season, then it benefits me economically. And I also believe that having a habitat for other animals is a really important element of my farm. And so there's a picture of the monarch butterfly here on some milkweed. And for those of you who know or don't know about the monarch butterfly, but it's this incredibly beautiful butterfly that also has a migratory pattern that goes through most of Eastern North America and is unfortunately endangered right now because of the way that we manage our land, both residentially, how we manage our lawns, and agriculturally, because it relies on this one plant the common milkweed. And on my farm, I allow the milkweed to grow anywhere it wants. And because of that, there's an abundance of these butterflies. And it brings me joy to be able to have a farm that I can side by side be producing my crops with habitat for all these other species. And I think that is just a reflection of who I am as a person and of my farming practices, but also of a coming of age of a spirituality of mankind that we can have what we need from this planet while also producing abundance of things that aren't directly for our needs. Sorry, I don't know if you can, there's a cat on my lap. She's being silly. I don't know if you saw a tail flap in my face. Um, but I think that's an important element is we don't have to look at farming as just an extractive industry just for humans and then all other species are being pushed to the margins. And that is how we interact generally on the planet when we're looking at resources, whether it's farming, whether it's logging, whether it's um, manufacturing, we're only looking at the very bottom line of what we can get out of that resource, rather than saying, what is the dance that I can play here that allows me to have a viable life and also produce an abundance of life for the entire planet? And I believe that this is actually a reflection of justice. And I think it's a reflection of justice because of the way that it balances all the needs of the land and the people and the inhabitants. I'm an inhabitant of the land and my needs are met, but also there's deer and possums and raccoons and foxes, and their needs can also be met on this land. And the actions of my farm enhance their lives too. And I know it's not perfect, but I do try. I really do take into account all of the various biodiversity on the farm when in my decision making of how I interact with the land. This is such an important quote. I'm going to read it all the way through. I'm sure most of you guys have seen it. If you haven't, this is one that I study often. Every man of discernment, while walking upon the earth, feeleth indeed abashed, inasmuch as he is fully aware that the thing which is the source of his prosperity, his wealth, his might, his exaltation, his advancement and power, is, as ordained by God, the very earth which is trodden beneath the feet of all men. There can be no doubt that whoever is cognizant of this truth is cleansed and sanctified from all pride, arrogance, and vainglory. I think that this powerful quote here reframes the way that we even look at the earth and reframes the way that our capitalistic society looks at extraction and looks at wealth. And I think that this is something that we can all take a lesson from and be humble. Humble that we are all beholden to just this thin part of topsoil. And that is where everything that we have on this earth comes from. And respecting that and worshiping that is really a key critical component of a healthy, mature society and ourselves as individuals. We talk a lot about today with climate change and carbon in the atmosphere. And we often think about ways to counter climate change in really broad, big ways that are inapproachable to the common person.
اینو
And
بفرستم تو باکن از اونجا برام تو میخوای روز بری یا میخوام برم چیز من رفتم تو آیبیکال.
I'm not sure if that was for us or if that was a mistaken taken off of the microphone.
No, it was just
I'm gonna
she was not muted, and so she got the speaker view.
Okay, no worries.
Go ahead.
So one of the things that we have at our disposal and a lot of us have access to and that we don't think about as a resource for fighting climate change is the soil outside of our front door. And how we manage that soil is actually a big component of carbon sequestration. And the soil is actually a huge carbon sink. And trees and grass and all these living things in our backyards, in our farms, in our community parks, they're all part of this carbon cycle. And so the more healthy and dynamic we can have our soils, the more life and abundance and organic matter that can be held in our land, the better it is. And I really believe, and I've demonstrated here on my farm, that regenerative grazing enhances sequestration. So as trees grow, I plant a lot of trees. I do raise livestock, but I love trees. That's what I'm more excited about is trees than I am livestock. I do the livestock because it's an economically viable path for me to make money in today's society. But trees are what really brings me joy. And watching trees grow and watching the soil grow and build and change season to season to me is something that I can practically do to fight climate change. And yes, it's just a small acreage, it's just a postage stamp of the world, but it's still something that I'm doing that we can all do in our own backyards to put some carbon in the soil and take leadership and take ownership of climate change in our own backyards. And the more that we can do this as a society, the more that we can do this as a global community, the more power that we have to shift the dialogue and change the climate change conversation into just being something that other people with more money and resources do to something that we can actually practically take measures in our own lives to do. And of course, this quote, man is the trustee of God on earth. I think that's an important component, is that we are the stewards of God's creation. So why does this work matter? Obviously, I just talked about how we can have an impact, however small, on climate change. And I don't believe that I'm going to change the world. I'm going to change the way that we eat in North Carolina for all the food that I produce in a year, which might seem a lot for a small farm. I think about it as there's a town south of me called Chapel Hill. I think it's got about 50,000 people. And I think about if I took all the food that I produced in the whole year, so that's 6,500 chickens and 1,000 ducks, 500 turkeys, 30 hogs, eight cows. I took all of that meat. We could have one big cookout for Chapel Hill. That's it. One big cookout, one lunch. So it's a drop in the bucket. It's a really small amount overall. And so I'm not solving the food shortages. I'm not solving how do we feed billions of people. But that's not my goal. I think that those are problems that are far too big for me to solve. So I'm taking a bite out of what I can handle, which is how do we steward the earth in a positive way? And how can we move from this degrading place we are in our agricultural system to one that is more mature and aligns with our spiritual destiny? And I can take it one step, maybe two steps, and then the next generation can take it a step and a further step. We've gone down this path now for the last 100 years and before of large scale extraction of resources from our planet. And it's not something we can change overnight, and I don't have all the answers. But we can do something. We don't need to just stop in paralysis and do nothing. We can actually do something. And that is what I believe I'm doing. And I believe it's my highest calling as a human to be able to use these skills and these resources that I have as a farmer to better steward God's creation and help us move as a society towards the most great peace. And this is an incredible alignment that I'm so lucky to be able to live day in, day out, to be able to have this alignment in my life where the faith and my agricultural vocation are in such alignment. And beyond that, I love farming. It is so fun. I get to be creative day to day, and I get to be a steward of a piece of land. And I think this is something as well that as a society, we have mostly given up. And I think it's to our detriment, and that we'd be so much happier and healthier and better off if we got to go outside every day and steward a piece of land. think this is something that we've been doing as a species since before written time, is stewarding a piece of land, stewarding an ecosystem to be able to live off of it and to live with it and live in it. And I'm just so blessed to be able to do that in the modern society and be able to carve out a living while doing it. And of course, in the Baha'i faith, we're aware of the concept of work is worship. And so labor done in service is a spiritual practice. And again, every day I get to steward God's creation. So every day I get to work in in a temple. I get to work in God's creation. It's just so beautiful to see, to get to be intimate with the land and how it works and how it flows. And I just feel closer to God every day by being able to do the work that I do. So in conclusion, regenerative agriculture, it restores the land and it restores the spirit. And it allows us as a society and as a global community to transform ourselves from this space of an immaturity as a species towards something that is more dynamic and aligned with Baha'i faith. And as we do so, as we learn how we interact with this planet and we interact in a positive way, it will reflect on us as individuals and as a community. And I'll end with this quote that one indeed is a man who today dedicateth himself to the service of the entire human race. Thank you.
Bravo, bravo.
Thank you. We can start first with the question. I think it was Dawn, was it you who asked that question? Dawn, I think you're on mute. I see your lips moving.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I thought you had such an interesting story of kind of where you started with your farm and how far you've come with it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And I think, did you have a question? Were you the one that asked the question
Yes,
before? And I said, we'll
yes,
get to it in the
yes.
question
Just
and
kind of
answers.
the evolution of your farm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I started off, I was going to do vegetables, actually. It was my original vision. And the at I want on one hand I got opportunities. I got opportunities in the world of meat, and so I pursued those opportunities. But then on the other hand, I was getting more and more excited about this restoration agriculture concept, using animals as tools to mimic ecosystem function. And so I got more and more into that direction, and it aligned with these opportunities that I kept getting for markets to be able to sell the meat. And so that's where I went. I abandoned the vegetables and I started doing more and more meat. And I think one of the compromises that I had to make as a farmer today is in the world of farming, if you're getting started, there's a lot of romantic literature out there about how you should farm or about how people farm, and it's very romantic and it's permaculture ideals and it's this idea that you should do everything and produce all your own food and be self-sufficient. And I think that that's a bad path to lead a farmer on in today's society. It's great as a homesteader, but I had to leave a lot of that behind. So I had to leave behind a lot of the different cool breeds of pigs and sheep that I used to do. Um, I used to do sheep before I did cows. That was another thing. I left that behind. And these are all things that I had to change and adapt as time went on, basically to make the farm viable economically. I still think that there's a lot of great things in a lot of these what are called heritage breeds, which are old breeds that have been around since before World War II. But going back to the problems are bigger than I know what to do with. The problems that we're facing in society are bigger than I can handle by myself. And I just am taking one small bite. And so by producing the Cornish cross chicken, which is just your conventional commodity chicken, but I do it in a good way, in a way that benefits the health of the soil, in a way that reflects the maturity of my spiritual realization. That is something that I can do today, and it doesn't solve all the problems of our food system, but I can do it and make money today and move the food system, have that conversation move one step forward. And so I had to leave a lot behind, a lot of those romantic ideals to be able to get to where I am today as a farmer. Um, Scale certainly helps, being able to get viable. The first couple of years were really, really hard. Um, and there was a lot of burnout and there was a lot of money being lost. And I really had to get a handle on the economics, and I had to get a handle on the numbers to be able to make farming viable. And unfortunately, as you brought up, Winnie, most farmers, I mean, I think you implied it in your question, most farmers are not economically viable. Even people who are independent producers such as me are not economically viable. They're taking money from a job, from a spouse, from family money, and they're siphoning it into the farm to keep it viable. I didn't have that option. I had to be viable because I didn't have anything else to rely on. And so I had to get really, really good. And that was another step that I took, Dawn, was to really get good at my numbers and get good at understanding how the business of the farm works. And all that, I just had to abandon those romantic ideals to be able to get to the place where I was viable. I think another question I meant to say in the presentation, but I skipped it over, Winnie, is your question about family. So I have a 13-year-old daughter, or almost 14-year-old. I'm married, and I have a 1-year-old baby too, who was in the first picture at the beginning of the presentation. He likes to move the cows with me. I've got a backpack, and we go out there, and he likes to sit on my back while we move cows.
Nice.
There's some questions in the chat, and we can start in there. I can also take any questions that come up while I'm finding a question in the chat.
Right. Yeah, there are quite a few questions in the chat.
Are you selling Birkenstocks on the side?
No, I'm not. That store unfortunately closed in 2009, kind of as the whole economy crashed. But I think that business was unfortunately going down anyways with the advent of online shopping, and big box stores started selling Birkenstocks. So, it was hard back then to have a small retail store. Now it's almost impossible to have a small retail store and to be economically viable. Let's see. I'm still looking. Humane way I kill chickens. I mean, I, I mean, I don't, I think this is kind of a funny question. And I think it does reflect our spiritual capacity, because at the end of the day, we are killing something. And that is just a reality that we have as a species if we're going to eat meat. And even if we're going to eat a carrot, you got to pull that carrot up by the roots. And how we do this is a reflection of who we are as a species. And I try to be cognizant of that, and I try to be aware of it. And we do it quickly. It's just a stainless steel cone, looks like a traffic cone, put the chicken through it, pull the head out, slice it. Simple and easy. Probably not what you guys signed up here to learn about. But we try to do it in a way that is quick. You're at the end of the day, we are a species that is, again, the cat's in the way. That is, we're killing other things to survive. And this is how our planet works.
Yeah.
We live in a world of cycling of life from one vector to another vector. And I think that if we're cognizant of that, that is the best we can do if we take it as a sacred thing. And if we are also aware that as eaters, which I'm going to assume that most of us here are eaters of meat, and as most of Americans are, and even if you are not the one wielding the knife, you are still a participant in that slaughter. And I think that's important. As someone here who has killed personally 100,000 birds, call it, I am doing that for you. And I think that's something that I want my customers to understand is yes, I'm the one killing the birds, but at the end of the day, I'm doing it for you. And you are responsible, just as responsible as me. Do I have several breeds of chickens on the farm? No, I only have Cornish cross chickens. That's your commodity chicken. Farming is really hard, and I used to experiment with different breeds of meat chickens, but Cornish cross is what people want. They're the most efficient, the most economically viable, so that's what I do. There are better chickens on the planet, I believe, but farming is hard and I got to get by today. That's a problem for someone else. I'm not getting paid enough to take on more risk, to take on more cash flow burdens or anything like that. So I just do the Cornish cross chicken. I'm not going to talk about flock health unless everyone wants to do that. Um, I guess I figured this was more a conversation on agriculture as it relates to the Baha'i faith. But more so in the general talk about how we manage our animals is a reflection of our own spiritual capacity and our own spiritual maturity as a species. Some kind words here about Birkenstocks. That's awesome. Happy to hear that, Evely. Is my farm certified fair trade or anything? No, it's not. I don't even think I could be certified fair trade because I'm not selling internationally. We're not even certified organic or anything like that. Most of our certification just comes from I'm the guy standing at the farmer's market and I tell you this is good and you agree. I think there's a lot of certification out there that unfortunately is for marketing purposes and doesn't actually reflect realities of small farms. And I would love to see some certifiers that can actually do not bend their will to larger economic factors and actually reflect small farms. But unfortunately, as small farmers, we don't have a lot of economic power and we don't organize very well. There's no union of small farms. And so there's not a lot of money working with us. We're a rowdy bunch of scrappy people who don't want to spend money on things. So there's not really a good system to certify what I do that I've found.
Mm.
What kind of trees? I love trees. Chestnuts are my favorite. If you don't know about the chestnut blight in Eastern North America, it is one of the saddest stories of ecosystem loss on the planet. I love these hybrid chestnuts that are hybrid Chinese and American chestnuts, and they're fantastic. Beautiful tree, abundant, great for wildlife. I also love mulberries, persimmons, things that I can plant out in the field and walk away from. Wild herbs as food for the animals. I don't know that. I'm sure that they do, but I'm not familiar with that. Um, Great story, Deborah. I'm just going through the questions. So any questions you have, feel free to reach up and ask me.
Right. There is someone, Mabel, you have your hand up. There is someone with their hand up for a question. Can you unmute? You need to unmute, Mabel. Thanks.
I think it's very courage of you to follow your heart and your commitment with the faith to do what you are doing. I wish I could do that, and I think it's my goal. So I follow your example in some things. I also wonder more or less how much is the quantity of animals and what kind of animals you have in your production to have an idea in 20 acres what will be. Also, if you do pasture with them, you supplement with food, I guess, but more or less a little description, very broad, of what you are, how you manage the farm. And I think that's basically my question. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. So I have for scale wise, as I said, I'm on 20 acres. So that limits how many bigger animals, how many mammals I can do, just from the perspective of wanting to do them in a regenerative way. So I have total between my farm and some other farms, I think there's 22 cattle. We finish about 8 of those a year. And I do last year I did 30 hogs. The last several years I've done 6,500 chickens, 1,000 ducks, and 500 turkeys. This year I did a few less chickens. We lost some federal contracts right at the beginning of the year when federal funding was cut. So we did 4,500 chickens this year. But that's the scale. And we do those in batches. So I'm not doing like all the chickens at once. They grow in 8-week cycles. So I do batches of 650 every couple of weeks.
Great.
Does that answer your question, Mabel?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
And the food, they do pasture, open pasture, and what kind of supplement food?
Yeah, so our cows are 100% grass fed, so just what they graze. And then for a few weeks in the winter, we do feed hay. So they're on hay right now. And then the birds and the pigs are on a non-GMO mix. It's locally milled from a place up the road. And so they get free choice ration of that. And that's a growth that they could grow just on that alone and not need any pasture at all. But they get bugs and grass and things from the pasture, and there's lots of trees, so persimmons and mulberries that are dropping that they can eat. But majority of their diet is going to come from that grain, which is an imperfect system, but we also live in an imperfect economic model, and people want to eat chicken, so I grow chicken. There's a there's a generally the way that we produce grain is not environmentally positive, but again I use grain because it's what we have to use to be viable today. And if I just held on to my core values and I said no grain, which is what I was going to do originally, then I just would not be producing enough to be viable. Great as a homestead, not great for a viable farm in today's economy.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
There was a question in the chat about land, and I think that's something that it's a question that a lot of people have, land being so expensive. How did you manage that?
So yeah, land access is a huge barrier for farmers. And I am blessed to be able to have been able to put a down deposit on the land when we so for 4 years I lived overseas. I lived in Cameroon. Fakembe's on the chat. Hi, Fakembe. Um, and I lived in Cameroon, and we were making American teacher salaries, which would have made us impoverished here, and we would have been in debt as most young teachers are. But being overseas, we actually able to take a lot of that money and save it. And so we were able to invest in some land here in North Carolina. And I would say that because of the cost of land today and how land prices are going up as more and more people move to this area and they're spreading out of the cities into the rural areas, the cost of land is skyrocketing. And so if I had to start today, I would not be here in North Carolina. I would not be able to afford to get started. And along with that, all of our costs of goods, all of the infrastructure, all of that is going up. So, I mean, I am just so lucky to be here, to be a farmer, because I would not be able to do this if I had to start today. And I think that is a grave flaw in our system of how we use land, that farmers don't have access to this. I'm not super familiar, but I do remember reading that Bob said that farmers should just be given land to be able to grow things if they're willing to grow it. And I think that that's an important spiritual concept is this is already so hard and the barrier to entry is so high, it shouldn't be that way. But I have a mortgage just like probably most of you guys. I have a mortgage and I pay the mortgage every month and the farm pays the mortgage and that's how it goes on. But just to be able to get enough money to put a down payment is a big burden for a lot of people.
Great. So, Helga.
Yeah, two questions. I understand the area where you're living has quite a bit of Baha'i activities going on. So I was wondering if there's any outreach connection to, say, for example, junior youth groups coming to visit and learning.
Mhm.
Is that a possibility? Are you doing it
Yeah.
and planning?
We've had a couple junior youth groups out here over the years, either just to learn or do a service project. Absolutely. It's been a while, but we had a youth. This is when I was still a youth. We had a youth training here, intensive training. Um, gosh, that was 12 years ago or something like that. But yeah, we've definitely used the farm. We are at the very outskirts of the triangle cluster. We're like a quarter mile to the next cluster. So I think that for most of the cluster, we are other world. But whenever someone has approached me to do some kind of an activity for the faith, I've always said yes.
That's wonderful. My other question is, my son and daughter-in-law, they have a little beginning farm in northern Vermont, and she works for an organization called Center for Agricultural Economy. Now, I understand the state there tries to develop regional food farming hubs to have more regional food systems going. Is that the case in North Carolina too?
I don't think so. That sounds like a cool Vermont program. Vermont does a lot of cool stuff like that. I'm not familiar with anything in North Carolina doing that. There was some funding. The local foods procurement program was a federal grant. Sorry, a federal grant that provided funds to institutions to buy local food. And so I was selling 2,000 chickens a year to, well, one, a local food bank, and two, a local high school, or the city of Durham's high school. But I don't know of any state planning that tries to have regional food systems. I think North Carolina's agricultural system is not thinking like that. I would
That's,
imagine that most of our stuff is going to be exported.
yeah,
So
that's
they're
a
not
big
thinking about
problem.
local food development. And also we lead the country. Sorry, we are second leaders in the country for agricultural land loss. Just in the county that I live in between 2017 and 2022, we lost 50% of our cropland to residential development. 50% in 5 years. And so I think unfortunately North Carolina looks at our land and says, hey, how can we make the most money from it?
Yeah.
And so we're not doing enough to try to stem the loss of agricultural land and create opportunities for farmers.
That's where the spiritual aspects are really so important.
I think so.
Yeah. And North Carolina also has big problems with pollution from hog farming.
We do. Yeah, that's mostly Eastern North Carolina, which is a couple hours from me, but that's also a big problem is the pollution from these hog farms because the way that they dispose of the waste is these big open lagoons, which can and do seep into the waterways and the land around them.
Right.
Thank you.
Winnie asked a great question I want to get to. She says, do you find that your do you find that your spiritual approach to making livelihood is recognized with the collaborators with whom you work? Do they ask you questions about your enthusiasm? And I'd say, unfortunately, no. I think that unfortunately, in my experience, most people just don't care. I think most people have people who shop for me, even people who shop for me and are regulars, I think that it's more of a selfish expression, like, oh, I can do either I can do something fun. Look, I'm at the farmer's market. I can snapshot of this cool meat, this cool sausage that I bought from a local farmer, or they want to feel good about what they're feeding their own families. But I think that the whole system of movement of my animals and of regeneration of ecosystems and regeneration of the human soul and our culture and our communities and our global way that we interact with our planet is just over the heads of most people. I think most people are just trying to get by day to day. We've all got issues, we've all got problems, we're all stressed out, and thinking about these deeper questions, just people don't care. And it does, so it can feel very isolating, actually. Really believing what I do in a really powerful way. And then somebody, instead of, I go to the farmer's market and I put myself out there and I say, this is what I do and this is what it costs to do this. And people are just like, oh, well, that chicken's expensive. And you're just like, well, that defeats the purpose of the whole underlying value of what I'm doing here, of regenerating this land, and instead you're just complaining about the price. So I think no is the short answer to that, and it is something that I wish that we thought more of is, hey, what is the underlying principle of the philosophy of the farmer who grew my food? How often do we ask that as consumers? What was the person who stitched my clothing thinking about? What was the person who made this hammer that I'm using? What were they thinking about when they, melted the iron or whatever it is? Or, we're not connected with our stuff in that way. And I think it is to our detriment as a society that we are not connected with the things that we use on a daily basis and the things that we eat.
So, Billy has his hand up.
Yeah, Billy.
Billy, you're muted.
Sorry, I thought I got off mute. Thanks, Ben, for taking the time today. I know the weather around here is wretched.
Right.
I'm just glad that we have power and service and we could do this call.
Yeah, we actually been fortunate. At least it wasn't freezing rain.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So what I was going to ask you is, so what are some of your current challenges, and what kind of things are you trying to make some improvements or in terms of process or et cetera?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Great question. Access to land, I think, is the biggest one. Being able to access more land to do more beef. I'm getting older. I'll be 40 this year. Poultry is a young man's game. It is really, really physically tough. I have to carry food. I have to carry the birds. We have to process them. There's just a lot of lifting and heavy stuff. And I am not getting younger. And beef is just more aligned with what I want to do. There's less inputs. It's less difficult on the body. It's just basically I get to go on a walk every day, which is really pleasant. Beef are beautiful animals, and it's a closed loop. But access to land to be able to do that beef is the biggest limiting factor for me. Um, and I think that the degradation of our rural economies, right? So North Carolina and the US used to have a thriving rural economy, and that has just been being eroded. And as a part of that, people, when they sell their farmland, they're selling it for residential. So now when a neighbor sells their land, it's a 100-acre parcel gets divided up into 5, 10-acre lots. And I worry that as I grow older, my rural area is just going to become low density suburbia. And losing the corridor of wildlife movements and of pollination and more cars on the road, more light pollution, all of these things lead to the detriment of the rural landscape. And so I think those two things actually go hand in hand. As more people move out here and degrade the rural capacity of the land price goes up, so I can't do more beef. So I think that's the biggest issue. I think that I'm facing today.
Have you
Consumer
have you talked?
awareness would be a solution there, just that how we act as a society, where we live, how we eat, those things impact rural areas like me. I know that at nighttime, I'm probably 30 miles from Durham, 25 miles, something like that from downtown Durham. When it's night, I can see the lights of Durham, and that breaks my heart. Like I live out in the country, and 25 miles away, the decisions of other people impact me. And they impact the migratory birds, they impact the insects. That breaks my heart. And over the years, I've seen that light bubble grow and grow and grow. And that is to the detriment of the ecosystem that I work with on a daily basis. So these things are challenges, and that's like a slow bleed. I don't know when that's going to make my life untenable, but it's growing closer every year.
Have you talked to the land conservancy people any about land opportunities?
Um, yeah, so there's a program in North Carolina called North NC Link, which tries to connect aging farmers with young farmers who want to take on land. Um, and I know the person who manages that, and my wife is on the agricultural preservation board for Orange County. So there are conversations happening. Um, and one thing that I'm doing now is just leasing land, but it does tend to get inefficient driving around managing herds on different people's land, you know. So I've got my herd right is down the road right now, just 5 minutes down the road, but you know, it's snowing out, so I'm stuck at home and it's just less efficient to manage them. Luckily, the landowner there said she'd be happy to go down and break the ice so that the cows could drink. And I put out a bunch of hay and just crossed my fingers and said, "Good luck, guys. I'll see you guys maybe on Tuesday or Wednesday." But it does become less efficient to be able to just not have a contiguous piece of land, but just working with what I've got. Neil McMillan here has asked, am I a member of farmer associations? Are workers migrants? What does my wife Salem do? Could you host activities as a model farm? Yes, farmer associations. I think the very best one is APA, American Pastured Poultry Producers Associations. Are workers migrants? A lot of them are. A lot of them are undocumented workers. I used to hire younger farmers. There used to be a lot of people like me who did not grow up in farming, who wanted to do farming. And we had a really great coalition of people who were working together and learning together for processing. And since the pandemic, that has just become less and less viable. And so I speak Spanish pretty well. And so I got connected with a group of Mexicans and Guatemalans who now they make up the backbone of our processing crew. And they're fantastic. And I really think the best of them, and they're probably the best people that I've worked with, and they're so lovely.
Yeah, I teach them here too. Have
Yeah,
exactly the same situation here in Canada.
yeah, very cool. My wife Salem works at she both at there's a farmers market in Winston-Salem that she started and she co-manages, and then that farmers market has a relationship with a company in Baltimore. So that's what she does as well. Works for different grants and things for them. Could I host educational activities as a model farm? Don't know what you have in mind, Neil, but sure. I'm always open to that. Um, nature of grasses. Do you seed for your forage crops? Much of the South is unfortunately heavily fescued. That was the big push 60 years ago or something to push fescue as a main crop, which has a lot of benefits, has a lot of negatives. So most of my farm is fescue. I have experimented with seeding crops, but I think that what I've noticed is overall, yes, I can get a better yield if I stay on top of it, but it does ultimately break up the diversity of the soil and you're just kind of getting that one crop. And so I remember last year I had this beautiful stand. Actually, if you go back to the slide, I'm not going to do it now, but in one of the pictures of the slide at the beginning with the baby, there's a beautiful stand of some millet that I seeded. And unfortunately, what happens is if I don't get another crop in there or I don't graze it down in like August, then it doesn't have a chance to grow back with any perennials. And so then it's just bare soil over the winter. And then it doesn't grow anything in the spring. And so I was either going to get on this treadmill of planting forage crops or just let whatever grows grow. And so I'm more on the path of letting whatever grows, except in one field where it's just I don't know what the previous owners did over there, but it's just such a mess. And so I do plant seeds over there just to get something grazable.
Hmm.
What do you do with your byproducts from slaughtering chickens? Do you have a way to process those
Yeah.
or to,
We sell what we can. We have some dog food companies that we work or dog treat
Mm,
companies that we work with. We make some of our own dog treats. And then we compost the rest and we make rich, beautiful compost. And that's just I think composting is one of the coolest things in the world. And
no, I
I
buy my
could wax
compost from
poetic on
Shane.
compost. So what was
No,
that?
I buy my compost from Shane. He works at one of the abattoirs. And he asked the bosses because he saw them having to haul off all these byproducts and stuff. And they gave him a place on the property to do this composting. And he sells the most finest compost. I pay
Yeah,
$3 for 35 kgs of compost.
that's amazing. Yeah. Compost is beautiful stuff. And taking quote unquote trash and turning it into beautiful living soil is just the most
Fantastic.
it is a spiritual transformation in itself. You take gross stuff and you turn it into rich stuff that brings more life. Just there's nothing more, no better metaphor for spiritual transformation than that. I love compost. We have a beautiful big compost pile. It's like probably 30 feet long and 10 feet wide, and it just makes me happy. And if you manage it well, it doesn't smell, it doesn't attract animals. And so we do a good job of managing it to be able to keep it from smelling because it's probably just a couple hundred feet from my neighbor's house, and if it starts smelling, he will tell me. And so I try to be a good neighbor and make sure it doesn't smell.
There's a question here about, are you in touch with other Baha'i farmers across the country,
Um,
around the
I
world?
only know if I mean of people like the agriculture working group, yes. So there's a good group in North Carolina that I'm aware of, both farmers and homesteaders and gardeners and people affiliated with farming. There's a few farmers I'm aware of in the country or farmer adjacent people in the country that I've met online, never met in person. I'd love to meet more.
Yeah, that's a suggestion that several people have brought up at one time. There should be some kind of group that just farmers, Baha'i farmers, and how they can work together to kind of support each other and
Yeah, that'd be
ideas.
fun.
Anyone interested, just, put your name in the chat. We'll see if we can connect people. Thanks. Any other questions? Any other thoughts?
So, what triggered your spiritual revival in the early 20s?
It came about because I was so frustrated with the world and I saw religion as this detriment to the world to being able to have peace. And I was looking for a way that we could move forward as a human species. And as I said, I grew up in a Baha'i house, but I really knew nothing about the Baha'i faith. Somehow I just blocked it out. I'm not even sure how I did it. And I remember being home Christmas or Thanksgiving or something like that, and I was just looking at like the Baha'i books on the shelf, and just like really, really basic stuff like one planet, one people, one God. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. Like this was a children's book. And I was like, hey, that's interesting. So then, I kind of went down that path and put one foot in front of the other and started learning more and more. And it started to answer a lot of the questions I had about where we were as a species and why we were having so many problems and the role of religion in society. And that this was all about the same time I started getting into agriculture. I was like 20, about 20 probably.
Ben, this is Winnie. I just want to mention that that group to whom that you visited at Billy's farm not so long ago is a lot of them. It was started in order to get this agriculture working group going.
Mm-hmm.
There were 14 of us that met in snowstorms in February. When we saw that there was going to be a ABS conference in Atlanta, which was not across the country from us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think if there's other people on this thread who don't have something like that in their state or locality, why not get it going?
Mm-hmm.
And I've mentioned this before, but when we asked back in the 90s, when there had been a statement on nature, could we have one on agriculture? The answer back at that time from Haifa was, well, show us that there are enough people in farming and agriculture to warrant that, because
Sure.
at that time there wasn't much information. So now we've got a lot. We just need to broadcast it.
Yeah, I think to that point is in America, in North America at least, it's odd to be a farmer. You don't meet many farmers, and they're not a part of our society very often. And in much of the world, that isn't true. And in much of the world, some of the most dynamic Baha'i communities are in rural areas and villages. And we know this now as a community. And I've served in many of those communities in Cameroon, and it's just beautiful to see these, farming is just what people do. It's just, yeah, it's just what you do. Like, of course you're a farmer because you're in a village, and that's what resources, that's what jobs and economic activities you have access to. And I served in a lot of these communities that were all farmers. And I think that their understanding of how land works and how ecosystems function and how their farming practices fit into that system is much more nuanced and advanced than the Western agricultural perspective. Western being American, European.
Thanks. So we're getting close to the end here. Simona has a thought or a question there.
Well, Ben, thank you so much. I just want to thank you for doing this. The presentation was fantastic. I think you can use it as a fireside and maybe even do something at the Triangle Institute so that people are more educated. I think there are people who are interested, but they don't really know where to go. So I think it's great. I'm so glad you do, and I'm cooking some of your sausages right now. So
Oh, good. I enjoy. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
sure.
Thanks, everyone. Any other thoughts before we end? Any other comments?
Say that I worked in Cameroon in 1984 to 1986, planting trees with.
Oh, cool. Where at?
Samandri. I was in Southwest Province, and
Very cool.
yeah. So I'm just texting you my email because there's Baha'is from Cameroon in the States.
Yeah. There's some even in the triangle from Southwest.
That's right, in
province.
Delhi Agba, but Emmanuel Ara is there too, and he's an agriculturalist. Anyway, so there's like networking, but I don't want to bother people with all those things. So
Yeah, that's so cool. Where do you live now?
I'm in Vancouver Island.
Oh, no
Um,
way. Cool.
yeah, and we have no snow. So I just was hoping to get in touch and
Yeah.
um, just follow up a bit. I'm still in touch with people there. So is my
Yeah.
husband. My husband was doing oil palm breeding in Low Bay Estate. Next,
Cool.
next, we were trying to save the Korup Rainforest Park. It had used to have little elephants in it and stuff.
Oh, no way. Cool.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the Rainforest magazine. We used to do a magazine every month
Oh,
called
no way. No, I've never seen that. That's so cool.
Anyway, it's not
I
very
was
but,
I was in Yaoundé, and Fakembe, who's on this talk, Anjabir and I, we served
Right.
together in Yaoundé.
go to Yaoundé to print the newsletter, the Rainforest magazine. And
Say again?
I used to go to Yaoundé to print the Rainforest
Oh,
magazine,
cool.
and I
That's
would stay
awesome.
with the Agani family.
Oh, yeah, yeah. The Yeganes. Very cool. That's wonderful.
And the
Yeah, I'm sure
Lincoln,
we know a lot of the same people.
I used to stay with the Lincolns too.
Oh, very cool. All
They were
wonderful people.
they were in Douala,
Yeah, Cameroon holds such a special place in my heart.
for sure. Anyway, I have a Cameroonian coming to stay in in next month. Yeah.
Very good. That's awesome.
Sorry to, I want to say that let's get the ideas to make a group of people around agriculture that is acting on that because, as you say, with the quotes of Baha'u'llah, agriculture is the main action of human beings. And I think it's the moment in the world now to get together and make some nets, not only of the people that produce, but the people that consume. So we support each other. So let's go forward with those ideas and Don, thank you for coordinate these groups and try to make us together because we see that day by day we need to make more efforts toward that. And thank you. I have to leave now, but thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mabel.
Bye.
Yeah. So then, Joe, be our last comment.
I wasn't going to comment, but then when he mentioned the the World Center not addressing agriculture just yet because there's not enough farmers. It seems to me everybody has to eat, and food is in a lot of respects a community security issue or homeland security issue, and so I thought I'd raise my hand. I did have two questions, maybe. One is you said you live about 30 miles from a city. So is there any regional activity to address farmland preservation? Because if you're in a metropolitan area, you're not thinking about preserving farmland and all of a sudden gas is going up to $10, $20 a gallon. You're not going to be able to get your food from another state or another country easily. So you need to be thinking about local food.
Mhm.
And do you have any thoughts of how to apply this regenerative principles to community gardens and urban farms, civic agriculture?
I haven't spent any time thinking about how to connect to urban farms. I'm a livestock guy. You do need space for livestock. I think that you're the other. So I don't have an experience with that. I can't speak to that. But the part about agricultural preservation, absolutely. As I mentioned, my wife is part of the Orange County, my county's agricultural preservation committee, which is a advisory board to the county commissioners who govern affairs of the county. And my county, Orange County, does a better job than most counties. We can't have just big subdivisions. You have 5 to 10 acre minimum lots, depending on where you are in the county. But it's still not enough. And I think that, I cited the statistic that we've lost 50% of our agricultural land in a 5 year period. And it is a testament that the state as a whole and the counties are putting their emphasis on the growth of serving those cities and letting those cities sprawl out rather than grow up in density. And I think that having a dense urban area is just, it's better for everybody. We have walkability, we have access to more resources, you get more exercise, just all, there's so many benefits to having denser cities, and those aren't things that we're factoring in as a state. And I don't really have a direct answer, but yes, I'm very well connected to this issue and paying attention to it. And it is, again, one of those issues that is bigger than me and bigger than I'm able to tackle by myself. And I think that we need to think about it as a society of where does our food come from, and what are we going to do when gas prices go up and we can't commute to our city jobs and we can't get food in from other places around the world and the country. Because that resilience is an important element to having a community. I do see
So is Durham in another county?
Durham's a different county.
Is Durham in your
No,
okay?
Durham's in Durham County.
Is there regional conversations going to be between different counties that are more rural versus more urban to work together to do this?
Yeah, so every county kind of has its own direction and how it manages its land. All the other counties around me are much worse off than Orange County where I live is, because there is more effort to preserving agricultural viability. Even though it's not enough, in my opinion, it is something, and most counties don't. So we can't, yeah, so every county is different, and they're going to apply whatever laws and developments they have differently according to their own county commissioners and their own governments. And I'm not aware of any cooperation between the counties. And I'm right next to both Durham County and another county, Person County. And they both have their own issues and opportunities.
It's pretty sad. I mean, I live in Metro Columbus, and there's a regional planning commission that includes about 12 different counties surrounding Columbus. But even when the state was pushing for farmland preservation, they didn't even really address that, and it's pretty myopic, and it's a sorry state of affairs.
Yeah, it definitely is. And there might be a regional planning, but I'm not familiar with it.
Okay. Yeah, and like the state, Ohio doesn't even have transfer development rights. If you wanted to try to like preserve, give people sell their development rights to keep the farm going, and cluster the residential environment.
Yeah,
and that issue goes. Anyway, I'll stop because our time is up. But thank you for addressing those thoughts.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, thank you for being aware of those issues and talking about them. I know we're out of time, but I do see if Akembe's got his hand up.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. I just want to say thank you for the presentation, and that it was great and so inspiring working a part of service together with you in Yaoundé.
It really was.
Yeah, I'm actually now in Southern Germany, but I also have a small farm in Cameroon, in the East Cameroon, Betua, where I'm trying to manage. Some of the good practices that you notice are still going on, but also some of the local people are forgetting the good practices and using a lot of chemicals also, which is a challenge. But overall, it's good. The dynamic is still good anyway. Many local farmers still depend on agriculture for livelihood. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Bertua is such a beautiful place. I'm glad you've got a farm there. I went out there once. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I mean those chemicals, I mean it's so easy to build soil that way and get a good growth. It's hard to resist. I know I've got cattle on one farm, and it has not been managed well. And so I'm thinking, like, should I just do one dose of some fertilizer to get things moving and going? Because it's a leased land, I'm not going to be there for long. So how do I get something right now out of it? And that's kind of my debate this winter. And it is something that as farmers we all have to deal with, is how do we make this viable? And farming all around the world and farming in Cameroon is hard. So we all have to make compromises and decide what's best to be able to send our children to school and buy food and buy clothing and all these basic things. So it's complex. It's complex.
Yes. All right. Well, thanks everyone. So good to see you all, and hope to see you next month. I did put in the chat the website where you can, if you're not on our mailing list, you can get on the mailing list, or if you have questions, you can go to that website. So thanks again, so much information here today. Really wonderful. I'm really glad. We have not really had anyone to speak on this topic before. There are many people who talk about regenerative agriculture and things, but specifically about livestock, this is something that I think is a real issue. I will say also that there's a great deal of interest in small farms. We're going to be having a reading group for a book called Small Farm Future, and there are quite a few people signed up for that already. So I think there's a very keen interest in the whole concept of small farms and the future of small farms, because we know that much of the world at this point is involved in their smallholder farmers.
Dawn, I
Yes.
wanted to mention all the great YouTubes that you've put on the website, that if people go there, they can, for instance, see Bill Hazen talking about his transition from one kind of farming to another. And there are many great programs there. So looking back is well worth it.
Right. All right. Well, thanks everyone. And thanks again, Ben. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.